You're listening to the Topco Business Unusual Podcast. Now, the Business Unusual Podcast. Learn from the greatest minds in business today. Interviews hosted by Ralph Fletcher. Learn how to improve business, get tips from industry leaders, and be motivated by real-life experience. Topco Business Unusual.
So welcome to this week's Business Unusual Topco podcast. Today I have a very special guest. He's the current chairman of Nedbank. It's Mr. Daniel Manelli. And so welcome, Daniel. It is unbelievable to have you on this podcast. I think your current roles is not just the chairman. I mean, they keep you busy, don't they? I mean, you're the independent non-executive chairman of SwiftNet. You're on the Brenton Woods Advisory Council. You're the current member of the board of the Salzburg Global Seminar. I've researched all these things. They're very important. But you were the chair designate for Alexander Forbes, former CEO of ABSA, and the former head of the Presidential Climate Finance Task Team. And you think that's it, but it's not. You were the former deputy governor, 2 terms for 10 years. I mean, I've got so many questions, and I'm sure everybody wants to know lots about you. But how did you get to this position? Because it is really, really impressive.
No, thank you very much, Ralph, for having me on the program, and thanks for that very kind introduction. You do have to remember that these things are all not happening at the same time. You're presenting them as if I'm juggling all those balls all at the same time. It's obviously been in sequence, but indeed very sort of varied background in terms of the things that I've been privileged to be involved with over the years. How did I get here? I sort of was born in Limpopo. Spent the first sort of part of my early childhood there. Had the opportunity of moving to Germany at the age of 13 to be schooled there and professionally trained there. So my sort of formative years were spent there. That's where I started my banking career, worked in the private banking sector for quite a while in Germany, spent some time in the city of London, in the UK, came back and worked in the private sector here for a while before I then moved to the Reserve Bank, where I was then to spend some 20 years, which culminated in 2 terms as a deputy governor, and from there was chief executive of ABSA for a short while, and had the other roles that you've mentioned with SwiftNet and Alex Forbes, and most recently then had this privilege of being appointed chair of the Nedbank group after I completed a contract advising the cabinet on an offer they had received from international partner countries to help support South Africa's transition to a low-carbon economy and a more climate-resilient society. So that was that Presidential Climate Finance Task Team that I led, and that with colleagues culminated in us producing the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan that was launched at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh last year.
Wow. So, I mean, just keeping it on the sort of climate task team, because I mean that it's quite a new role that created, but I can't help but think the goal of, coming together and agreeing on 8.5 billion or finding a plan, $8.5 billion, and that's a lot of money. So I'm thinking you must be a master negotiator, tactician to sort of develop this plan. What did you learn from it?
Look, I mean, the first thing I guess I would say, Rob, is that it was a tremendous honor and privilege to be afforded that opportunity to coordinate and lead that work that was giving effect to that historic Just Energy Transition Partnership, and as I said, which culminated in us producing that Just Energy Investment Plan. The adoption of that plan by Cabinet and launching it domestically and taking it to COP were certainly very, very proud moment and a very groundbreaking project, the first of its kind, with South Africa providing global leadership. And I guess the big learning out of that work in developing the plan, and under severe time constraints and almost against all odds, one could say, was that through a collaborative approach, which is underpinned by common purpose, focus, dedication, lots of hard work going into it, much progress can be achieved. And nothing, of course, focuses one mind than an unmovable deadline.
Yeah. So, I mean, the goal and the deadline, I think it's all the things we said. We keep on saying things don't move quickly enough in terms of implementation and plans. And so here we have a deadline of outside funders that we need to service, and we certainly moved quick enough. So it's not that it can't be done, it can be done, and you've proved it.
Indeed.
So,
and the other issue that you touched on earlier, Ralph, 8.5 billion, that sounds a lot. It's probably a lot for you and me. But in the bigger scheme of things, of what we need to address and the actual resources that are required to finance this transition, it is actually a drop in the ocean, if you think about it. And in fact, the plan itself went beyond the 8.5 billion and said, what is it that we need for the first 5 years, based on South Africa's specific needs and priorities, to kickstart this multi-decade transition. And as you know, we came up with a plan that was closer to $100 billion, not 8.5.
Yeah, I mean, it's a significant amount of money, and I think that the thinking there, from what I understand, is that, and that's why it changed to the just transition, the just energy transition, and that word "just" is so, I don't know, important, right? Is that? Do you think? I mean, the just is meaning that how do we impact society, not just making sure that we grow green in the environment, but the social impact is covered. Was that a big part of the thinking? And that's partly why the budget increased significantly from the initial investment to the 100 billion?
No, I think that's a very, very critical component in coming up with what sort of guided the work that we did there, being the agreement that South Africa entered into with those international partners, was that as part of decarbonizing the electricity sector and looking at the other two sectors that were identified as priority sectors, being green hydrogen and the new energy vehicles as such, for South Africa, all of this had to be aligned with our national priorities, had to be informed by the National Development Plan in ensuring that the key systemic challenges that the country is facing around poverty, inequality, unemployment, that as part of that also gets addressed. So that essentially you're looking at how you engineer a whole society, a whole economy transition, and most critically making sure that those that stand to be most affected by the transition, particularly if you look at the decarbonization of the electricity sector, a province like Mpumalanga, where a lot of coal-fired power stations are based, where a lot of our coal mines are, where the impact is going to be greatest, that workers and communities that are going to be affected are appropriately taken care of, that we ensure that the risks and the opportunities, the responsibilities and challenges that come with this transition are properly taken care of. And in particular, as you say, the social component was very, very important in all the considerations. So climate justice and the justice component in transitioning to a low carbon economy and a more climate resilient society was absolutely central. And it was key in the negotiations that we need to make sure that the justice component is properly addressed as part of our programs.
And sort of what was the reaction from the international community on this just energy transition plan? How did they react?
No, there was good, very positive reaction, and obviously from the outset, it was made clear that South Africa would lead the process. So it was going to be a process that was going to be country-owned, country-led, and country-specific. That was going to speak to the specific requirements, needs, and priorities of South Africa. And essentially, these countries were supporting South African ambitions, in particular as they were articulated in what is called a nationally determined contribution, which was deposited just before COP26, actually, which demonstrated our ambitions in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions, in terms of the profile that was put out. So they came in to support that, but the political declaration, which was how that agreement was called, right at the outset included those just transition and component, and it was absolutely critical that the partners were on site in terms of supporting that, and they did. And when we launched the plan, we had very, very strong statements of endorsements from all the presidents of the countries that were part of the partnership.
So where's the next steps now from the Just Transition Plan? Because obviously we've got COP28 coming up, and I suppose in many ways it's how do we create more impact and not just a talk shop from something like COP28. How do we move now from a plan and moving into COP28 to create some sort of outcomes that can leverage this big opportunity?
So obviously the plan addresses South Africa's transition as a stepping stone for the first 5 years, if you wish, towards a much bigger long-term transition plan of the country. So it's important, while of course international meetings such as climate summits, COP, and those type of milestones, if you wish, provide an opportunity to take stock, to see where we are, where we're falling short. We have to be careful as well not to work in such a way that we keep chasing, one COP after the next and lose the longer term vision and approach that we need. So following the launch of the plan last year, work has been underway to develop an implementation plan, which is really moving from the what to the details of the how. Yeah. And that's work that has continued in the presidency, and my understanding is that that is about to be completed, and we may actually at the time of COP28 see the implementation plan being presented, and that's obviously the next step to then get the tire to hit the tarmac.
That seems like the thing. That's what I've heard, that the thinking is that the implementation plan would be sort of presented at COP28 or thereabouts. So I suppose the idea there is how businesses can work with government essentially to execute on this plan. Is that the thinking?
Well, the whole transition, basically, not just in South Africa, globally, is a gigantic, if you wish, public-private sector project and opportunity. And just to quote the words of Mark Carney, who used to be the former governor of the Bank of England and is now chair of something called G-Funds, which stands for the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, which is a collection and a coalition of financial institutions that are are mobilizing finance to support the transition. He said that famously, that we need the private the sector trillions to leverage the public sector billions. So essentially the transition is going to be delivered by the private sector. The retooling of economies, huge infrastructure investments, and all of that are things that are going to be driven and powered by the private sector, for which, of course, they need appropriate and conducive policy framework, predictability in policies, regulation, reporting and disclosure requirements, and so forth. But it's a major opportunity for public-private partnership.
And do you think there's a strong enough relationship between the private sector and the public sector to sort of bed out this opportunity in the right way?
I think there are significant initiatives underway, and certainly in South Africa of late, there's been, I think, an injection of new energy into public sort of private sector collaboration. You'd recall the CEO initiatives that is focusing on some of the pressing areas that have to do with energy, with transport and logistics, and the whole complex of crime and corruption, various working groups that have been set up, a very clear and strong sort of cadence of meetings and check-in that take place regularly and to monitor progress. So I'm not doubtful about the commitment to collaborate because I think both sides fully appreciate that one needs the other to move forward.
Yeah, I'm often intrigued because I often think of entrepreneurs, academics, big business and policymakers all having their own sort of siloed thinking. You know, one thinks the other isn't good enough or doesn't think the way they think or doesn't understand their challenges. So I'm often surprised when they do come together, how they do work quite well, but they're not coming together enough. Is that something that you see, that we're not coming together enough on these issues? I mean, some people say talk shops, but do we need to actually build better relationships with business and government?
Well, obviously, what is important is that these relationships are underpinned by a level of trust. But Ralph, I wouldn't be that negative in terms of people not coming together, not sufficiently talking. Of course, we constantly need to make sure we're on the same page, check in with each other, hold each other accountable for the kind of commitments that we've made to each other. But I think we are in a situation where the challenges of this country are so huge that everybody from all manner of constituencies and parts of society have shown, great level of interest for collaboration and working with each other. These are difficult processes and not always easy to bring them together. But I think the commitment to try at least this is not one that one could question.
It almost feels in some ways like the ship has burnt. Those who are going to leave have left. The capital that was is going to depart has left. And it feels like now you've got the people in this country who want this country to working on this country. Is that a sense you're getting?
Well, not really. I think it's not just a question of people that are left here to carrying the baby, if you wish. I wouldn't present it that way. I think there are people that are usually committed to and invested in the success of the country, and we have tremendous support from international partners that want to support the work that you do, that want to see South Africa succeed. So it's not a question of people having sort of turned their back on South Africa and you and I that are still left here having to do all the heavy lifting. I think it's a combination of those of us being here, doing the necessary, exhibiting the right sense of urgency in what we need to address. But many of these things we can't do on our own and depend on international support, and which we have seen that if we put in the right policies, is really forthcoming.
Yeah, wow. It's great to hear that. I think that we saw this groundswell of support for, I don't know, the Springboks and whatever, all over the world. So you can see that there's a special place for people in people's hearts for South Africa.
I would believe so. Certainly in the years that I was involved in sort of international relations and participating in various fora, there was always huge interest in what South Africa has got to say, what South African views are. We were always invited to share our perspectives, and I do believe that there is a groundswell of support of people wanting to see us succeed, but of course, in many respects, as they say, helps comes to those who try. So we need to deliver our side of the story to make sure that we continue to be able to rely on that support.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose there's two questions really. Are these climate goals feasible? And then the other question I've got is, what is it that we need to do as business to support these sort of things? Is it more doing? What in your mind is sort of needed to get the sort of support, the investment that's needed to make these climate goals feasible, I suppose?
Well, I think the climate goals are feasible, and they obviously, a lot of what is being put on the table is science-based, is informed by science in terms of what we need to do. And a lot of at times people are saying, look, isn't that too ambitious? And how about growth and all of that? And we made it quite clear in the plan that there's really no trade-off between growth and tackling climate change, because a lot of these initiatives provide opportunity to drive growth, actually, because there is investments, as I said, that needs to be undertaken. There's an opportunity to create new industries, there's an opportunity for innovation, and in the process you propel growth and create jobs. And so to that extent, that's a very, very critical component what you need to do. So we just need to make sure that we are pragmatic, we are flexible, and obviously a country like South Africa starts off a very difficult position in terms of transitioning. We find ourselves already with an energy crisis. We have a fiscal situation that is quite delicate. But there are opportunities that we need to pursue that will help get us out of this. But it needs to be in a balanced manner that takes into account country-specific circumstances, where our starting points are, so that this doesn't just remain talk. So I do think those climate goals that we have set in terms of our decarbonization ambitions in the new NDC, which were arrived at, of course, after wide consultation with various constituencies in the country. So they are feasible, they are achievable, and we need, as I said earlier, that common purpose that's underpinned by focus and hard work to get to them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing is that there's a lot of innovation. Some people call it frugal innovation. It's where we're seeing that these innovations in sustainability and, coming through in South Africa, because we don't have the funds necessarily to drive the future, but we're definitely seeing a shift in entrepreneurs and businesses focus on sustainability, decarbonization. My brother works in the UK, and there's massive work in terms of certifying factories and organizations in terms of their carbonization or decarbonization. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing this sort of groundswell starting to happen, where there's an interest and people are coming to organizations like Nedbank for funding for these sorts of projects?
I mean, it's obviously important, given that we're transitioning. There needs to be that innovation, and it's a global phenomenon that we're seeing all over the world. And it's exactly what I was saying earlier on, is the great opportunity in this change to create new industries, to be innovative, to tune in with other processes that are going, such as technological advancements, AI, data analytics. All of those kind of issues provide opportunities for new funding that will help propel the transition. It's important to realize in this process as well that this is not something that it's a nice to have or that we're doing because there are new regulations and we need to meet those. It is good business. It is a structural a change in terms of where the opportunities are going to lie and where returns are going to come from. And that's why banks and other institutions are heavily invested in making sure that with the public sector, we work together to make sure that we sort of exploit these opportunities, because climate change is a systemic issue. It's one of the defining issues of the 21st century, and we require this urgent and unprecedented action with cooperation from all sectors, and as we were saying earlier on, the partnership and the collaboration across public and private sectors is very, very, very important for us to move things forward. And this needs to be long-term partnerships that can deliver sort of long-term outcomes as such. So these are great opportunities that we should harness.
I can't help but think, is it cheating that Nedbank acquired you or got you as part of their team? Because obviously you've got the insight for this just transition. Obviously you see it very clearly. How much of it has it changed, or is there a common thinking with Nedbank around your approach to the just transition?
Well, I think, quite honestly, one of the issues that attracted me to Nedbank was that strong commitment of the group and their strong track record to sort of sustainability and green financing and innovation in that regard. In that sense, there is a meeting of mind. I don't think we can talk about a coup or anything. There are no special insights. The plan is available. The thinking is shared with everybody. But I think there's certainly a meeting of minds, and I'm very, very comfortable being there and knowing that from a point of view of purpose, and that's underpinned by a common set of values, there's strong alignment for what I stand for and what the bank has always been aiming for and is doing very well.
No, I was sort of pulling your leg a little bit there. No, I get that. But and how does the Just Transition Plan, how does it change the approach for Nedbank, if at all? I mean, I think it's been 5 months you've been at the bank now, so it's not quite 6 months, but you've done your first 100 days as chairman. Are there movements towards this that you're seeing or co-creating, or how is this adapting the approach?
No, Ralph, I mean, as I indicated just now, I have joined Nedbank on a journey that the group had already been on. And as you know, we say that our purpose is to use the financial expertise that we have to do good for individuals, for families, for businesses and society overall. And the good in that particular perspective is that, it represents our understanding and our commitment and the need for systemic solutions and the challenges that are facing society. And climate change is obviously either creating some of them, worse, exacerbating them. So using that financial expertise to guide and contribute to a more sustainable future is really what Nedbank has been about. And there's nothing that has changed miraculously in the last 4 or 5 months. I've joined a journey that they've been on, which is about taking meaningful action that require our contribution to managing climate change risks. And there are lots of issues that the bank has been involved in. I mean, in 2021, Nedbank became the first bank on the continent to release an energy policy that will see the bank sort of making an orderly exit from fossil fuels over time, while scaling up its involvement with renewable energy financing, in which area it's already a leading provider. We've also said that we'll stop financing thermal coal mines from 2025, and there is a strong commitment to net zero by 2045. So the sustainable development finance strategies have been in place. And as I said, I've just joined them to support and help implement and move the process forward. And we have a goal, for instance, that by 2050, we would want to make sure that all our lending and investments are supporting a net zero. And on the way there too, a shorter term goal is that by 2025, for instance, we would want 20% of all our loans and advances that we make to be in the area of sustainable development finance. And that's a big ambition and a big contribution we'll be making.
Yeah, I think like working with Nedbank for quite a while now, one of the things I've realized is they do have audacious goals and targets, but they seem to reach them. And I can't help but think, what's more important, these audacious goals and targets, or the fact that they know they can reach it and bring the team together? And I've also seen that working with the team quite a bit, that there's a reason that I suppose that you're there. I do see a collection of some very entrepreneurial minded, in a banking fraternity. I'm seeing actually a lot of entrepreneurial minded people, and you keep on talking around their approach, and I feel like I'm talking to like Rassi in a way. And I can't help but thinking, they've chosen a great leader here who obviously, who came from humble upbringing, who was exposed internationally to the sort of German banking and the UK international banking. And so, I'm interested, what did you learn in sort of the German and I suppose the UK market from working in those areas?
Interesting question. I suppose, Ralph, I worked there many years ago. Those were probably sort of the formative years, early years in their career. They obviously would have influenced the later progress. But I would think, certainly as far as Germany is concerned, I literally just did my banking training and just come out of training and got my first roles there. It was really just, learning about discipline. I suppose they instilled work ethic in me. So those were great, great years of learning, of building one's own capacity. And similarly, the years that I worked in the city of London, I was relatively junior in my career still, but that was great, great learnings that certainly helped to support what I did later. So I wouldn't want to have missed those experiences.
Yeah, I can't help but, having met you and spent time with you at the Nedbank Top Empowerment Conference, you also got this aura of calmness, like you've got everything under control. And so was that something that you sort of got from your parents, or is that something that also came from those experiences going overseas as a young man?
I don't know. It's a good question. And well, I guess some of it probably comes from my later career, but that's on a lighter note. When I was a policymaker, because you have to keep calm when there's turbulence and there is all manner of policy decisions that needs to be made that are not easy and that type of thing. It's important that you stay calm, because people are looking to institutions such as the Reserve Bank and the Monetary Policy Committee for guidance and those kind of issues. I think a lot of it would have come from there, because you're exposed to various difficult trade-offs, decisions, policy decisions that one needs to make, and you can't quite panic when you're facing those kind of issues. You just need to kind of be disciplined, stay calm, go through your thought processes, and I don't know. Maybe some of it might have come from what that role demanded many times.
All great leaders make generally great decisions. Do you have a process for making big decisions? Do you have a structure of doing it, or does it just come naturally to you now?
Well, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. Sort of, it's written down somewhere as a structure, but it's. I suppose you learn that over time develop your own style. But it's always, I think, important to be clear around, firstly, whether it's the decision that you should be making, whether it's a decision that you can make, what the impact of that decision is, which then also determines at times how quickly you need to make it, the issues that you need to take into account as to whether you need to consult, who do you need to speak to, do you have all the information at your disposal to be able to take that decision. And it's a multitude of issues that, I guess, one eventually internalizes and draws upon as and when the situations arise. But it's not, there's no sort of set formula to say, look, that's exactly how you're going to do it when it happens.
Yeah, I like that answer a lot. So, I mean, how did your time as the deputy governor of the Reserve Bank, I suppose, influence your understanding of policy and its impact on the country?
Look, that was a big change for me at the time. I was involved in project and structured finance when I did that career switch, and knew very little about monetary policy, next to nothing. So that was great sort of learning over the years. And clearly the Reserve Bank is a very important institution. It makes decisions that are cross-cutting and pretty much affect every citizen in the country. So you learn a lot there about impact, about the importance of the decision, how the economy works, what other issues need to be taken into account, looking at the information that you've got from different perspectives. You learn a lot about risk management, because in most cases it's about a risk management approach, a balancing of probabilities and what the outcomes could be. You learn to appreciate the importance of the decisions that one makes in terms of the impact that will have, and sometimes it's a bit scary when you know how important those decisions are.
I bet. And I mean, going to this new sort of career, because I think there's a lot of people growing in their careers, and if they're going to move to, the drastic transition, and they're maybe changing the trajectory of their company or their own careers, what is it you learnt from that? Is it that it's possible to take on these new careers? Because like you're saying, it must have been scary to have that sort of level of complexity you've got to deal with now.
Look, I mean, I guess if you shift at a relatively senior level or at the leadership level, things are relatively similar, actually. You have to manage senior people. You have to think about strategies. You need to analyze the operating environment to see how it impacts where you currently are. You have to devise sort of strategic plans and implementation plans. You have to deal with stakeholders, with the broad universe of stakeholders. Those type of things actually represent themselves across the economy, across industries. At that senior level, there are similar issues, obviously differing by industries and particular environments that you're in, but from an approach and principles point of view, I think things are actually relatively similarly poised.
Sure. I'm wondering, as one of our leading leaders in certainly the financial institutions, I mean, is there any books that you've read that you thought really captured you in terms of leadership?
Well, I mean, over the years, you attend training sessions and you read books. There are different books. I mean, I like reading autobiographies of leaders, but not just financial leaders, political leaders, and so forth. So, and also just to talk to people, listen to people, hear about their experiences. So I couldn't sort of say to you, there is this particular book that influenced me or anything. I mean, there is a book that I read a couple of years ago, which I thought was quite interesting for me, which is about, it was actually political leadership in the modern era. And the title of it was The Myth of a strong leader, which basically talks to sort of embracing team and collaborative approaches, accepting that you can be wrong, and listening to others that have better insights, and leading and guiding that way with humility and all of those kind of things. That would be the most recent sort of leadership book that I read, which I thought was quite interesting. But no, I can't say to you that there's a single one that kind of shaped my outlook on leadership. No.
There's many. And are there any values that you see as good leaders having? I mean, I can't help but think of someone like Rassi, the way he worked with the team, him and Shark. There had definitely some attributes that brought around that. I mean, we were talking around how nervous we were towards the end of all three games. And you know, one can't help but think there was talent, but he brought people together. He brought a unit together. He brought a country together in many ways. I mean, are there things that you see in good leadership that is needed to tackle the change, these disruptions, the constant, I suppose, challenges, not just in South Africa, but globally that we're faced with?
Look, Prof, I suppose, yeah, big question. I mean, at the end of the day, I suppose, you know, and that will never change. Leaders are people that, in first instance, ought to be sort of honest, upright, trustworthy individuals with high levels of integrity, such that people feel that they can follow them, because a sense of leadership is followership. I mean, if people see you, respect you, and understand what you stand for and where you're trying to take them, they will follow you. And the test is always whether people follow your leadership voluntarily, when they don't have to. When people don't follow you because you give the paycheck at the end of the month, or you've got authority to influence promotions, and those kind of things, because then you're just leveraging authority, but you're not really leading as such. But I think it's important to communicate. It's important to take people along, make people understand where you're coming from. It's important. Most important is to listen and to hear people's views, and incorporate that into your thinking. But you know, I'm not a leadership guru that can give you all sort of theories about leadership as such.
I don't know so much. I look at your CV and it talks about great leadership. And I'm, you know, I only spent 2 days with you at a conference, but what I noticed is that you listened to a lot of people, even though you spoke for 15 minutes or half an hour. You sat there listening to everybody else on different panels, and I could see you invigorated and listening deeply to other people, and I was left impressed. I was really, you know, I work with a lot of leaders, so, and I mean, I suppose the question is, was there anything that sort of came out around the Top Empowerment Conference that you took away from? I know there were some people speaking from different areas within Africa. You're head of, I think it was Namibia, you're head of Zimbabwe,
Yes.
Yeah, both women leaders, and there's some from Botswana. And they didn't talk about so much the just transition, but they did talk around how do we localize our products. Was there anything else that you learned from that?
Look, as you recall, a lot of it was sort of framed around transformation and with regard to how one would harness that as an opportunity, particularly across the African continents. And you're quite right. I was quite fascinated by the different views and the different opportunities and that present themselves on the continent, and what role we can play, and that there are huge opportunities on the continent. But it was wonderful listening to people talking about their respective environments. Obviously, we're all impacted by the global environments that are shaped by what the global economy is doing, what geopolitics are doing, but how people translated that into their respective environments and how that affected their operations and how they're navigating the challenges as they present themselves to them in those specific situations was fascinating.
Yeah, I think there does seem to be this perception of the macroeconomics, what's happening with the exchange rate, the inflation, all those sort of things. Sometimes we can get a bit, I don't know, is it negative? Am I being honest here and saying that sometimes you get a bit down, you think, oh dear, this is happening. And isn't it when you go to these events and you see how people are actually achieving great things, even within these challenges? Is that part of the reason for these sort of summits and conferences to share these best practices?
Well, I think, yes, part of it is, I mean, obviously it's not, the world economy and the particular period that we are finding ourselves in is quite complex, and there are lots of challenges that we needed to navigate, and the complexity is ever increasing, the risks are there, and so these conferences and these events I find always useful to sort of exchange notes, learn from each other, share experiences, and also to realize that you're not on your own. There are other people that are sort of having to grapple with the same issues and tackle the same issues. They help you broaden your network of contacts so that next time when you come across a situation, you say, oh, there's a guy called Ralph that I met there, and he seemed to know things. So why don't I call him up? And it's those kind of things that kind of help there. But yeah, but it's also wanting to make sure that you align with people that in all these challenges, in all these risks, still are looking to move processes forward, are still looking for opportunity, which is always there. And so to that extent, in that sense, there can be a helpful sort of a positive reinforcement at times when you go to these conferences.
For sure. So I suppose that the last question is that we're looking to grow the economy. We're looking to grow Africa. Is there any advice you have for people around how we can come together more and grow this economy, how we can grow our companies, how we can grow and improve society?
Well, you basically go back and say, what is the challenge? And the single biggest challenge, of course, for us in this country is that we are sort of caught in a low growth trap. So that's where we need to start. What is it that we need to do to lift our potential rate of growth and drive our economy towards that level, such that we can deal with those structural issues that I mentioned earlier around inequality and poverty and unemployment? So it is about enacting the right structural reforms with the right sense of energy. It's about having a policy framework that is predictable. It is about making sure that we put in place measures that are conducive to supporting confidence on the business and the consumer level, to ensure that people are happy to invest, people are positive about the future, to want to invest, and to make sure that whatever it is that we need to do that gets the economy growing, that creates jobs, that gives people dignity, that reduces sort of unemployment and poverty, and that we focus on that. And as we've said, as part of the various initiatives that government and business are working together, also important to have clear focus and direction, and to say what are the issues that are going to be catalytic in terms of propelling that growth. And as you know, it is the issue of energy security and energy supply that is most pressing, that we need to address. It is the bottlenecking the issues that we have in our transport and logistics area, and the big area of crime and corruption that has to do, of course, with our governance process, with accountability frameworks, with enforcement, and making sure that we hold people accountable. And you start showing meaningful progress in those three big areas, you'll see the rest falling into place, and you will see this economy performing at the level that it is capable of.
So focus on the three critical things. Don't try and do everything. I can't help but think from an individual perspective as well, like your growth has come through you investing in yourself. And so learning, developing your skills, looking outside as well, looking what other people are doing, how you can innovate your own business, your skills, those things seem also critical to us.
Absolutely, Ralph, particularly given how the world is changing now, making sure that we are all sort of IT savvy, that we are future-proof digitally, and those kind of things. But generically, whether now or in previous eras or in the future, we learn every day and must never stop.
I have learned so much for this conversation. Thank you so much, Daniel. It was great to have you. I know you're a busy man, so we're very grateful for your time as well. And hopefully we see you soon.
Thanks for the chat, and we'll catch up soon, Ralph. Nice talking to you again.
Thank you.
Take care.